Well, hey, it's Dan Wilt here, and I'm glad you could join me for a seminar on an epic formula for making a band sound great. Glad you could dig in. It's as part of the Essentials in Worship Toolkit series, which is part of the Essentials in Worship training material. And I want to encourage you to connect with me if you would over at danwilt.com. Lots of free resources I send through the email list there, encouragements, worship team devotionals, and other items that I hope will encourage you in your journey as a worship leader, as part of a worship team. So let's dig into our material, an epic formula for making a band sound great. Well, how do we arrange a larger band? I really believe this. No matter our sound, whether we have a hard rock band, a soft rock band, gospel, liturgical type of sound, we have to start with some basic principles when we're thinking about arranging, and particularly about arranging more and more instruments. Voices are instruments, drums are instruments, choirs are instruments. These are all elements that play a part in a larger sonic experience, and there are ways to make something sound great, and there are ways to make it not sound so great. So using these 5 ingredients, you'll have an epic formula for making whatever it is you're working with sound strong, and create an environment for people to have their guards down and respond to God in worship rather than being distracted by what's happening sonically all around them. So here are the 5 ideas. Number 1, establish your sound. Number 2, layer from the ground up. Number 3, communicate roles. Number 4, start from rhythm. And 5, build with taste. Let's look at each one in turn. First of all, establish your sound. Well, what sound are you after? What are you looking to be able to create? You'll have to start with basic principles when it comes to making that particular sound work. Some congregations want the ability to create different types of styles and sounds to serve a diverse community. More acoustic sounds, more folk sounds, more big gospel sounds, more rock sounds, more ambient sounds. Lots of different preferences and lots of different reasons to apply them in a local church. Well, those sounds can be expressed with different instruments, different types of singers, and different types of bands. Again, each of those elements within a sound can be changed in order to create this overall sound that you're after. Where I think many bands get jammed up is that they're trying to create the same sound with the same instruments, they're trying to create more diverse sounds with all the same instruments doing all the same kinds of things. And you need to change some things up in order to get toward that sound that you'd love to have create that atmosphere for worship and responsiveness to God. Well, these are all elements that need to be in place for you to achieve varieties of sounds, instruments, different singers, different sonic textures, different kinds of bands. So understanding what instrumentation and abilities you have available to you, we don't want to work with things we simply can't pull off, it just doesn't come off well, is the first step in making your band sound great. Know what you've got and what availabilities are available to you. Then layer from the ground up. All arrangements begin with the groove. I'll touch that in a moment. The bass drum and the bass guitar. These instruments, they interact, they lock together, they form that rhythmic foundation, and they bring the groove to life. And everything else can be layered on top of it. If that is off, the bass drum and the bass guitar, together the whole band will be off. So you take the time to make sure the groove is solid with bass and drums. And once the ground level is strong, then you can work on the inside rhythms. Then you can start filling gaps with sounds that have more frequent repetitions or brought to life by instruments like a hi-hat, like an acoustic guitar, which mimics the hi-hat. They're both inside rhythms. But you can't get that straight unless you've got that lowest foundation of kick and bass locking in together. Then you add on other instrumentation like keyboards that layer on top of those inside rhythms like the hi-hat and the guitar. So you've got boom, boom, and then you've got acoustic and hi-hat, boom, and then you begin to layer on in other instrumentation like a keyboard. Watch out for similar patterns of rhythm among instruments. Everyone sticking to their roles, creating space for other instruments to create breathing room in the music is really important. So you don't want a keyboard player doing this when the acoustic player is doing this. You want a keyboard player just opening things up, adding textures, creating sound, or even strings, or pads. You want it happening at different areas of the frequency spectrum, low and high. So there's a whole broad range in the music you're creating. All instrumentation, whether you're in a musical trio or an orchestra of 50, must add up to 1. That's the fraction principle. So if you've got 7 instruments, each instrument gets about a 1/7 of the sound. They don't all get 1 or your sound adds up to 7. You want to create the fraction principle, a 1/7 of the sound. If your musicians take on more than their designated amount, the music, and people don't know how to put words to it, they just know it feels irritating, overbearing, it feels dense, and maybe even frenetic. You got to create space and layer from the ground up. Then communicate roles with the band. So you've got your groove instruments, you've got your inside rhythm instruments, you've got the mid-range sound of keyboard and guitar. So how do you create a beautiful musical space with everyone in your roles? Well, first, we have to teach our team that silence is just as important to the music as playing. It's okay to ease off playing if it benefits the overall sound. We're creating space. Stressed, especially in vocals, stress blend, tight sonic blend. That means in terms of their phrasing together, in terms of not a lot of vibrato that makes the sound warble all over the place when you get 2 or 3 people giving vibrato. People who are in choirs need to back off and learn the art of singing with what we call buzz, which is a more vibrato-less sound that locks in with the 2 or 3, or even in some bands I've been in 5 or 6 vocals. So you've got this tight phrasing, tight harmonies, not a lot of vibrato, and it sounds like a clean texture locking in behind the worship leader. Phrasing is really important. People ending words at the same time. People finishing phrases, giving the same rhythmic bounce. I often will work as a worship leader with my vocalist on how rhythmically I am singing this phrase. So they get used to my phrasing, and then they map with one another and with it. So having that smooth texture allows your team to support the lead vocalist or the lead vocals and match what the worship leader is doing in her or his rhythms. And that buzz can be translated into some sweet harmonizing. Often the studio trains people in this. Often in-ears can train people in this if you allow yourself to be trained by hearing yourself back and mapping in with the wider group rather than being a solo instrument trying to cut through with your own thing. This takes a lot of self-restraint and it takes a lot of training, but we want that unified sound and voice. Ingredient 4, start from rhythm. If something in your rehearsal is starting to feel out of place, scale back again to the drums and bass. Get all your musicians engaging and entering in again to engage and lock in with that rhythm to connect with the groove again. I'll often start the band over and just say, just drums and bass, go. And then I'll add in an instrument one by one just to see where a problem might be happening. And that's a great way to scale back and start from rhythm again. Often the groove is where the issue lies. So I'll work the drummer and bass player till we've got the right groove with the snare hits, the hi-hat, cymbals, etc., the toms, feeling like it's the kind of background we need to layer everything on top. The other instruments can't find their place if that foundation is weak. So having started from the rhythm, you're in a position to build a great sound with your band. And finally, ingredient number 5, build with taste. When you add in more symphonic instruments, more choral voices, other instrumentation, you have to be increasingly sensitive to that fraction principle. You want your sound adding up to that one fluid, spacious sound. If you're adding on and it's busy, you're not building with taste and you're making it more frenetic. The more instruments you have, the more you have to obey that fraction principle. Encourage your musicians to ask themselves throughout the set, should I lay out? Should I not play rather than always assuming I should be joining in because I'm up there? What can I add that would serve the song the most? What can I not add that would serve the song the most is a question that many musicians, they just never get around to asking. They figure they're up there to play. But serving the song may be asking 12 musicians to hold back. It's the nature of the music. It thrives on space. Maybe just the piano opens it up. And the piano doesn't even have to fill the space. It can be rhythm. It can be simply a piano player. Just giving moments and letting them ring out. That fills a space. It covers the one. and then we add in things tastefully from there. So these tools can help make your band sound great. When you're arranging a large band, the song is king. Whatever it takes to embellish it, beautify it, amplify it, to musically communicate its message, and connect your congregation is the win. That's what we're after. If there's a problem, strip the music back to the rhythm, rebuild from there. Let each musician master their own part, and that might translate even into separate rehearsals. I do vocal rehearsals. I'll sometimes do rhythm rehearsals. Tell people to go take a break while we work on a certain set of instruments. Playing in a different frequency range, holding back altogether. All these things enhance the music. It might also help to break up your rehearsal time into groups of musicians so those troublesome areas can really be tackled before you all come together on the stage. Well, blessings as you make your band sound great. Again, I'd love to have you join me and our resourcing community over at danwilt.com. If you sign up for the newsletter list there, you'll get a free download. And then on a regular basis, I'll send free downloads, encouragements to you and your worship community, worship team devotionals, and other resources that I believe will help build you as you seek to create environments where your community can experience the presence of God, whether it's a small group all the way to a large group environment. I look forward to connecting with you over at the site. Thanks again for joining me for an epic formula for making a band sound great.